Hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you so much for being here, everyone in person and for everybody online. My name is Ty Sidgley. I'm the David H. and Ann L. Hinchcliff Professor of History and the Executive Director of Common Ground. And I'd like to welcome our guests, David Blight from Yale University, Lucas Morel from Washington and Lee University, and our moderator, Nina Moore from Colgate University. Really appreciate you being here today. Thank you. So Common Ground's mission is to promote and practice civil discourse to prepare citizens for active citizenship. That's part of our mission at Hamilton College. So Common Ground works to create opportunities for our community to have respectful, honest conversations on difficult subjects in a variety of different ways. Tonight's discussion is on the meaning of the Declaration of Independence from 1776 to today. And after tonight's event, we have several follow-up opportunities. So tomorrow, April 23rd at 12 p.m. in Levitt Center, we will have a post-event luncheon catered by LAFA. On Monday, April 27th at 12 in the Events Barn, we'll have Common Ground continued with Professors Doug Ambrose, Rob Martin, and Morris Isserman, and lunch is, of course, provided. We have Common Ground because of the support of our leaders, faculty, alumni, and friends. The college is especially grateful to Mary Helen and Rob Morris, David and Lori Hess, Eve Niquette, and Charles Pohl, the Warning family, and the Pooley family. Their support is indispensable. And I want to thank our Common Ground ambassadors who are here and the Common Ground team, Katie Stewart and Kim Ritchie. So this is not only a Common Ground event, but the first in a series planned over the next several years for the college to reflect on the semi-quincentennial. There'll be a quiz afterwards on that word. That's the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding. We have many ties to the founding of this country. Of course, our namesake was an officer in the Continental Army as an aide to George Washington and then a combat commander at the Battle of Yorktown. Our football field is named after Friedrich von Steuben, the Prussian general who transformed the Continental Army at Valley Forge. Our mascot is the Continentals, wearing blue and buff, the colors selected for the American Army by George Washington. Additionally, our neighbors, the Oneida Indian Nation, participated in the Revolutionary War on the side of the Americans. So I'd like to thank the other members of the Hamilton 250th Committee, Nathan Goodall and Morris Isserman, for helping us design this program. So let me introduce our moderator, and she'll introduce our guest. Nina Moore is the inaugural Dr. William L. Boyle Jr., 55, Endowed Chair in Political Science at Colgate University and the Department Chair. She is author of several books, the latest of which is Towing the Line, the Supreme Court, Race, and Affirmative Action. She is currently serving a 4-year term as governor-appointed commissioner on the New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct. Nina also serves as the host of Ivory Tower, a weekly discussion roundtable of current events at WCNY, our local PBS TV station in Syracuse. I am one of the panelists on that show, and Nina is not only a brilliant academic, but a superb moderator and leader who does the extra work to make a bunch of academics sound smarter than they really are. So, Nina, thank you for moderating the discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Ty, and thank you to everyone who's come out tonight for what I'm sure is going to be a wonderful discussion with two brilliant scholars. And so I'll introduce them in greater detail, starting with David Blight, who is the Sterling Professor of History and Director of the Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition at Yale University. Blight recently co-authored the book Yale and Slavery, published in 2024. He is the immediate past president of the Organization of American Historians and the author or editor of a dozen books, including Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom, American Oracle, The Civil War and the Civil Rights Era, Race and Reunion, The Civil War and American Memory, and annotated editions of Douglass's first two autobiographies. He's worked on Douglass much of his professional life and been awarded the Pulitzer Prize, the Ben Crow Prize, the Abraham Lincoln Prize, and the Frederick Douglass Prize, among others. In 2020, David was elected to the American Philosophical Society and awarded the Gold Medal for History by the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Please again welcome Professor Blight. Lucas Morel is the John K. Boardman Jr. Professor of Politics, and he is head of the Politics Department at Washington and Lee University. His publications include Measuring the Man, the writings of Frederick Douglass on Abraham Lincoln, Lincoln and the American Founding, Lincoln and Liberty, Wisdom for the Ages, and Lincoln's Sacred Effort, Defining Religion's Role in American Self-Government. He is a former president of the Abraham Lincoln Institute, a consultant on exhibits at the National Archives, National Park Service, and Library of Congress, director of workshops for several organizations, and a founding member of the Academic Freedom Alliance, the U.S. Semi-Quincentennial Commission, I passed, which is planning the 2026 National Celebration of the Birth of the United States. Please again welcome Professor Morel. So I'm going to begin with some fairly bland questions, but I think they are also very important. The first one being today, what is the meaning of the Declaration of Independence today? Either of you that wants to start.
Well, that's a great question. The good news is that this year you're going to get the Declaration whether you like it or not. Probably by the end of the year, be tired of red, white, and blue. The good news is, even though I'm on this federal commission, and we've been planning for several years, so many other individuals, centers, schools, you name it. The town that I teach in, Lexington, there's a Lexington 250 Commission. So we are in some form or fashion fixated on the birth of this country, which Lincoln taught us, among others, began not with the Constitution, but the Declaration of Independence in Lincoln's day at Gettysburg 77 years ago. So the good news is we still think the Declaration is important. It has something to do with what makes you American. Lincoln called equality the central idea of this country. But I would have to say, kind of a quick coda or addendum to that, I'm not sure we talk about equality as much today. A word among academics, at least, came into vogue several years ago, the word equity. And it seems like equity is more part of at least the parlance of the youth today than the word equality. So for some reason, equality has become a debatable proposition. So I'd be interested in what folks think about that.
Okay. David, same question to you.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. I'm not in any technical way a scholar of the founding or the founding documents, although in recent years I've been doing a lot more about the Constitution and recently the Declaration. The Declaration of Independence gave us our civic language. Equality being one of those words, liberty, the doctrine of consent. How about the fourth first principle, the one kind of forgotten sometimes, the right of revolution. Our language about freedom and tyranny. This is where it comes from. Tyranny is used numerous times, especially in the 27 grievances they outlined against King George. When we talk about creeds, American creeds, we say frequently we're a creedal country. Where are the creeds? In the Declaration of Independence. It's also a time, I mean, now anyway, with this anniversary, and by the way, saying 250th is much easier than that quincentennial business. Just say 250.
Just trying to be fancy like
No,
that.
I know, but
America
that's cool,
250.
but I always blow it when I say it. But it makes us think about the nation, especially in academia. We're obsessed with our parts. We're obsessed with our groups, our tribes, our fields, and not without reason, because some of those fields are still relatively new, and they need people to defend them and advance them. But something like this 250th and the Declaration of Independence, since it has so much to do with defining what is an American, although the 14th Amendment will later come along and help that, as will the Bill of Rights, but it makes us think about the whole nation, the whole country, which we don't always do, frankly. It's also a birth story. I mean, if America has a birth, at least in its ideas, it's right there in that document. They're not perfectly original by any means. Jefferson didn't just sit there one night and all these things popped into his head. He'd been reading them. I mean, Jefferson was a deep reader. So were the other members of that 5-person committee. But it's a source of our creeds, our civic language, our birth. And any country that survives this, I mean, let's face it, republics have not often, in fact, hardly any have lasted 250 years. Republics don't last, historically, partly because they're more violent. But, you know, it's a birth story and hence always a rebirth story. The Declaration of Independence gives people rebirths. All those people who come here for millions who've come here as immigrants and go through naturalization. Some of you have probably been through that process. Has anyone ever attended a naturalization ceremony? Yeah, I saw 2 of them. That's about the creeds. It's about the creeds. And for those people, it's usually some kind of rebirth. They're becoming something new called an American. So it's kind of our ultimate source, in a way.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about that as the ultimate source, the originating, organizing source. Where did it come from? What informed their initial pronouncement of our civic language, our creed? In the world that they lived in, what informed that?
You've done more moral philosophy than I have. You go first on that one, too.
Late in life, Jefferson said that the Declaration, as he drafted it and started to take increasing ownership over...
Yeah, he wanted the credit for it, right.
One of the 3 things he put on his tombstone. He said it was not intended to be something wholly original, but it was intended to, as he put it, bring about the harmonizing sentiments of the day, which is to say that a number of these streams fed into the thing that he called an expression of the American mind. So this, what you call creed, the whole, our identity. And he made an interesting comment or observation about where they drew their inspiration from, and it was deliberate for Jefferson. He mentioned both ancient and modern sources, right? So ancient is in Cicero and Aristotle, the modern ones being Algernon Sidney, and of course John Locke, where he lifted entire phrases and clauses from the Second Treatise of Civil Government.
And there are no footnotes on the Declaration.
No, not the last time I checked. Maybe they're on the back. But at any rate, the Declaration of Independence was kind of partly new and partly old in terms of what David was referring to as its moral, political philosophy. But the point being, this was the stuff that was so in the air at the time that as 2 years prior to the Declaration, you have slaves in Massachusetts petitioning in their way with language that's more or less found later in the Declaration of Independence, the concepts of consent, the concepts of rights, the concept of equality. It's in the air.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't wholly new, but certain parts of it, we think, oh, it's an Enlightenment document. But, God's mentioned 4 times in there, so it's not inconsistent with... Well,
he had to be revised.
At the end, it's the product of the Second Continental Congress, and so there are these 4 references to God in it, and so consistent with, if you will, the major world religions at the time, and yet not deliberately written so it's not a sectarian expression of the arguments in defense of political separation.
You don't have to be Christian or a theist to embrace the Declaration of Independence.
Theist?
Even though God is,
Okay, we can talk about
it
that.
helps.
If you are one.
Okay, but Jefferson had to be pushed to put more God in there, but that's okay. I mean, that was who he was. I would just add, too, I've been reading a lot recently about the Declaration because that's what everyone wants to talk about. I was struck. I didn't know this history. All over the colonies, even down to the local town level, colonial legislatures, towns, counties, have been writing these declarations of various kinds. Some of them are just resolutions they send to the Continental Congress saying, you guys ought to think about this. Think about declaring some independence. I mean, we need to break with Britain for economic reasons, tax reasons, all kinds of reasons. The port cities want it for this reason, the farmers want it for some other reason.
Right.
Zillions of these things are sent to the Continental Congress and to these men as individuals. So when that committee of 5 goes off to draft a Declaration of Independence, they're reading all this stuff. They're even reading the British Declaration of Rights and the Glorious Revolution, and they draw language from that. So and not to take anything away from Jefferson's committee or the Continental Congress, but they're drawing off all kinds of persuasion out there that is actually all but begging them to do this. And the committee goes off, and actually Jefferson, I think, produced his draft in 48 hours.
2 days, yeah.
And then they started editing and ripping it apart. You think you've been edited by your professors. Jefferson lost about 1/4 of his original draft, and he hated it. He didn't like to be edited.
Yeah, well, so understanding that it was very much informed by what they were thinking about at the time, the historical context in which it was forged, do you think that Jefferson, the committee, were thinking about it being a lasting document? Because those who framed the Constitution very much had in mind ensuring that it would last for the ages. And the way that the Declaration is written, it's written in very universal terms, right? Even though the application wasn't universal. So did they anticipate that we'd be sitting here on this stage right now talking about it?
Well, I don't know even if Hamilton would have thought of Hamilton College yet, but no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
A quick answer to that seems to me, oh, you bet, because a lot of those resolutions that were coming in from the towns and the counties were legalistic. They would begin with whereas. Is there any word more boring than whereas? That's a legal term.
Yeah.
No, Jefferson decides, when in the course of human events, now you got to read on.
Yeah, it's very sweeping.
Oh, you've got to read on now. What's going to happen after the course of human events? And of course, the first and second paragraphs are moral philosophy. They are eloquence. And the last paragraph is extraordinarily eloquent, and that's mostly Jefferson. That's written for the ages. They're hoping. Of course, this thing could have failed. They could have lost the war in 2 years, and the whole gig was up, and it'd be a weird artifact of some different story. It's going to take winning a Revolutionary War for this thing to stick, which is one of the reasons nobody talked about it during the war. But I don't know, what do you think?
Well, the way they articulate, and I say they, because ultimately it is redacted, it's edited by the Committee of the Whole, the entire Second Continental Congress. There's 2 phrases in particular, right? One of them is, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
Candid world,
Okay?
yeah.
So in other words, if you're honest with yourself, you got to admit, we're right, regardless of whether we win or not.
Hear us
right?
out.
Exactly. And the other one is a decent respect to the opinions, plural, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind.
I love that. That's a good point.
And so right there, rhetorically, the Second Continental Congress is throwing down the gauntlet and saying, yes, it is true, we're going to hear this. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Clearly, most people did not. We hold them to be self-evident. But to say that we're going to throw this out to mankind, right? Not just to fellow Americans, not just to prospective allies like France eventually a year later, but to say that we're making an argument that we think is so right, it doesn't matter if we win.
Well,
We think God's on our side, but it doesn't matter if we win. We think that the arguments that we will make can be understood, and we're going to make it in plain English so that it would be, if you will, kind of irrefragable, right? It would be incontestable that what we are saying is even if we don't win, we deserve to win. For me, that is a testament for the ages. That's not just the efficient cause of our breaking away. That was done 2 days earlier, right? With Henry Lee's resolution, right? So we didn't need a Declaration of Independence we passed that resolution already. In fact, that famous letter that Adams writes to Abigail saying, we're going to remember July 2nd from now on, blah, blah, blah. Of course, we don't remember July 2nd. But that's when the deed was done. That's when they voted. Now, New York had to come back later because they were not given, the delegation was not given permission to do that. They had to agree, and they did that. I think they got permission on the 9th of July. But to your question, at the end of the day, they were writing for the ages.
Well, think of the word inalienable. What does that mean? Natural? It can't be alienated. It can't be
divested.
Destroyed. It can't be stopped. That's one way of saying this whole thing is rooted in the natural rights tradition. The rights are natural. They're from God or as Jefferson says, God or nature's God. Jefferson wasn't very religious, in case you hadn't gathered, but natural rights in a world that doesn't fully buy that yet, if we ever have, but inalienable. You can't deny this. You can try to kill it. You can kill the people who believe it. You can maybe overthrow a government that might believe it, but you can't kill the rights. Frederick Douglass once referred to natural rights as like precious ore from the earth. It just is. So they're talking to the ages there too.
Yeah.
I don't know where Jefferson got that word inalienable. It's probably in Locke or somebody. I don't know.
But as much as it is a statement of natural rights and written for the ages, do I understand it correctly that it wasn't talked about at the Constitutional Convention? The
No, I mean,
place where you're
barely.
going to codify and protect the rights?
Barely mentioned.
Right. Well, we know what we know. Right? There
Yeah.
were the secretaries who didn't write a whole lot about what was going on, and then Madison's notes that he deliberately kept private. In other words, he did not let them become public until after his death.
40 or 50 years, more than that.
So what we know is that there wasn't a lot of talk about it, but because these are two different tools, right? The Declaration of Independence, although there are principles that will inform the establishment of constitutions that will produce, as they put it, their safety and happiness, what the Declaration is doing is declaring if you will, the purposes of government. And once you know those, and once you know in a relevant sense what the nature of man is, then you know what government is supposed to do. Then you know what a legitimate government looks like, and then you get that whole list of he has, all the things King George III had done wrong. They'd already dealt with Parliament earlier in the First Continental Congress. But the Constitutional Convention was about, it's the way the preamble lays it out, to form a more perfect union. We had tried unionizing, if
We've got
you
a
will.
union, but it's pretty bad. Let's make it
Right. We
better.
have this Articles of Confederation, perpetual union that was not
Not very
perpetuating
good.
very well, and
Yeah.
it's because it wasn't a real government, as Hamilton points out in the Federalist Papers. So the second bite of the apple, or second crack at the thing, the Constitution has to do real work. What little we have of moral philosophy is in the preamble, and is implied in, why are there the three articles dividing up powers in this way? Oh, right, even though separation of powers, that phrase doesn't exist in the Constitution, it's there. Three articles, right? And the way the powers are delegated and the kinds of articles. So it's because, the short version is it's because they have different work to do.
Yeah.
Isn't it, correct me here if I'm wrong, but several people I've been reading say that the Declaration is all but unmentioned during the war, the Revolutionary War. It gets read widely at the beginning.
Read widely, published widely. Washington, whose name isn't on it because he's in New York,
Right, yeah, he's got
he
an
gets a
army.
copy,
Yeah,
and the
he has
first
it
thing he
read.
does is he says at 6 o'clock or whatever it is, Ty will correct me, I want everybody in formation, and we are going to read, that is to say, we're going to hear the thing read verbatim.
At the beginning of the
Wow.
war. But they got a war to win
Yeah,
against,
yeah.
against the,
There's that.
the most powerful nation on earth.
Yeah.
And the Declaration is no longer as relevant as it is, oh my God, how do we pay the troops? Oh my God, how do we tax when nobody wants to be taxed? How do we move in? We don't have a navy. What do we do without a navy against the biggest navy on the planet? And then when it's time for the Constitution, Well, it's true, we don't. We don't have dictation of all the debates. Some things you read, you think we do. So-and-so saying to so-and-so, and you think, how do they know that? But the Declaration is much less important until they get political parties,
Right.
and we have the Second War of Independence, War of 1812. It's after the War of 1812, which is quite a long time, it's then that the Declaration becomes this American icon. It's seen everywhere, voiced everywhere, quoted everywhere. By the 1820s and 30s, Lincoln calls it his Bible. He comes of age in the 1830s, and the Declaration of Independence is the most important document he's ever seen. But that was not the case in the 1780s and 90s until they had party. And then the Jeffersonian Republicans wanted you to know, Jefferson wrote this.
That's right.
You know, not those crazy Federalists. I mean, and besides, Hamilton and Adams, they wanted to be monarchs and all that, you know. As soon as they had real partisanship, then the Declaration sort of has use again. I find that fascinating because it's this iconic document, but only when they needed an icon.
But even the Federalist Papers talked about the language of rights.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, sure.
Talk about Federalist number 10 and all of it being couched, and here's why we're not going to have a pure democracy because of rights. Here's where we're going to have a limited because of rights. Everything
Right.
is about. So it's not mentioned explicitly, but one
There
certainly
is one
sees it in the
Federalist, to my shame, I don't remember which one, but there is one Federalist where it is directly quoted.
Yeah.
But your point is the valid one, which
It's in the
is
air.
it's the language.
Yeah.
It's the what did you call it? The civil
Civic
language.
language.
Yeah.
Again, it's the harmonizing sentiments of the day. There's in those early years, there's no need to cite the source when it's already in the air. It's like telling fish that they're swimming in water. It's like, well, of course, what else would we swim in? This is the American way.
Yeah, it's understood. Okay, so we've talked about the historical context. Let's get into the document a bit. And I want to start by asking you both, what is the most debated line in the Declaration of Independence?
Well, we both brought our copies.
You are not allowed in this building unless you can prove you have
I
a
don't go
pocket
anywhere now,
constitution.
Okay,
Especially
the
the
most
Constitution.
debated line, exactly. Right?
I'll let David go first. Here.
No.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, I want you to go first.
Well, I mean, it has to be the equality line. We hold these truths to be self. It has to be the first thing
Yeah.
on the list.
It is. The whole-
All men are created
It's the beginning of the second paragraph.
equal. Okay. Well, what did they mean by
Yes.
equal?
Mm-hmm.
And
I
did it-
forget pursuit of happiness. Nobody knows what that means.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that maybe. My time's up.
No.
we
Probably,
can
believe the time
8
is going
o'clock.
quickly.
I think
we've-
what's key here, because look, my expertise is on Abraham Lincoln, and believe it or not, those who attempted to secede and tried to form an independent Southern nation called the Confederate States of America, they actually quoted the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, yeah.
They actually talked about equality. But what they meant by equality and what I would argue Jefferson meant and the Second Continental Congress meant by equality were two separate animals. And so I would say there's a pretty clear consensus that equality at the time, and I mean, here's where the key part, which is why I would argue, David, that there's a natural theology, not a revealed theology per se, although it's not inconsistent with it. There's a natural theology in the Declaration. It refers to the Creator, it refers to providence, it refers to the supreme judge of the world. That ain't no clockmaker deistic God, right? That is a God that's involved in history. I did mention I'm a Lincoln guy, right? Go home and read the second inaugural. So by equality, if it's created, it's antecedent in principle to government. And that is to say, well, in what way are human beings, as human beings, equal? What makes them equal? Right? And it's because they possess this thing that they cannot be divested of, which are these rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The word we more frequently use today, almost entirely, is dignity. We all have dignity. Doesn't matter how low on the totem pole you are, even the worst criminal should have dignity. We should be treated with dignity, right? The old-fashioned way of thinking about this is this phrase, imago Dei, that all human beings are made in the image of God. They've got this divine spark. And so equal as humans. And it's that equality that leads us to say, oh, well, therefore, there's no natural ruler of anyone except that person.
Yeah.
And if you're going to tell me what to do, you got to get my permission first. That's why I say consent is, as I like to tell my students, is the flip side of the equality coin. It's precisely because we're all equally human that you have to say, pretty please. You got to get their permission first. I think that's the most contested one because, well, if they were all equal, why did we have rhymes with knavery? Okay, why didn't we get rid of that right away? I get that every year when I teach American government. But what about?
But the contradiction, yes. This is absolutely right. We owe these truths to be self-evident. Go on for the next 5 lines is the most important passage. But they spend more words on the right of revolution. They spend more words when they get to whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation. It's a run-on sentence, actually. Laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, and it goes on and on. When the evils of the tyranny of your government become such that it's intolerable, you have the right to abolish it. They spend more words trying to justify that because that's what they're doing. They're throwing off a monarch. They're throwing off the British Empire. They need justification here. And, it's not as eloquent, and it's got that kind of almost a run-on sentence with too many adjectives, but it's the act of revolution that this is justifying in a world where how many successful revolutions against monarchy had there been? Woo! Not a lot.
And how long did those last?
Yeah, and so it's an interesting way to read the document. And then, of course, when they get to all the 27 grievances against King George, that gets boring, when you read it. He's done this, and he's done that, and he's violated this, and he's violated that. But that's justification. They are reaching for the reasons why they had to do this. And there you get into the edits, the real changes that were made in this document, because there's some stuff that never got in that was in the original draft. Library of Congress used to display Jefferson's original draft. I thought it was one of the coolest documents I've ever seen, with all the scratchings and oh my God. You see John Adams, marginalia. But Jefferson had a long paragraph condemning the Atlantic slave trade, explicitly. Blamed it all on King George. That got all whittled down to how the king was inciting internal domestic insurrections, and that's it. They took all that out. Thomas Jefferson wanted that in. Now, you want contradiction and hypocrisy? It's on steroids because of him being a slaveholder. But they had justifications for that. They were terribly and dangerously wrong in their justifications, but nevertheless they had them. But I'm struck now in reading it how much energy and words they spent justifying that right of revolution, because that's a very big deal. It's one thing to claim all these moral rights before God. It's another thing to make war on the British monarchy. And what if you lose? You're going to hang. Or worse.
With all those wonderful rights and great civic language.
Yeah. You're going to go down with your civic language.
Yeah. So good luck with that. David, I want to talk a little bit about the contradictions that you mentioned through the lens of Frederick Douglass's 4th of July, 1852 speech. Talk about that a little bit. He was very blunt about recognizing this is a wonderful document. You're all great people, but say more.
But pardon me, why have you invited me here, he says. Now, Lucas is a Douglass expert too, so I invite you in.
I didn't write a Pulitzer Prize winning biography.
No, never mind, you weren't supposed to say that. 1852, now there are thousands of uses of the Declaration of Independence for this irony and that purpose and that purpose. But none are quite like Douglass's 4th of July speech, and it is now somewhat more widely known. It is publicly read on the 4th of July in many communities. We do it in New Haven at the Beinecke Library, and we have like 5 people read it, and it draws a huge crowd. They always give me the ending. I don't like the ending's the dull part, but I like to portray the speech. Now, before you go to sleep tonight, go back and pull it up online and read it.
After you read the second inaugural.
Yeah, second inaugural is much shorter.
Write this
They
down.
won't get to the 4th of July. It's like a symphony in 3 movements. Douglass was a master of rhetoric, and the 4th of July speech is a masterpiece of English rhetoric, both in form and in substance, and I might add cadence. But the first movement of the speech, which is about 6 pages of text, is putting his audience at ease. The Declaration of Independence is your national Passover. It is a glorious document. It is your founding birth. That founding fathers were geniuses. And he's speaking to 600 people in Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York. He's in the house of his friends. He was invited by the Ladies Anti-Slavery Society of Rochester, who were his friends. Little did they know what they were going to get. And about 6 pages in, the hammer comes down. And he says, "Pardon me, why have you invited me here?" And he starts raining the word "you" and "your" and "you" and "your" down on his audience. It's your 4th of July, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. You, your. He's separating himself. And then he goes into this litany. And this is now the second movement of the symphony. And I'm told by my music friends that the middle movement is always longer. Well, Douglass, I guess, knew that. But the whole middle of the speech, 10 pages or so, is a litany of all the evils of slavery. And he has that genius with language such that he reaches your senses. He makes you smell the hold of a slave ship. He makes you hear the clanking of the chains on slaves. He makes you see an auction block and a woman's child taken away from her. To the extent rhetoric can make us feel and see and smell in our senses, this speech does that. Oh, and my God, he lambastes the Fugitive Slave Act. And it goes, as I said, it's like a hailstorm is raining down in that hall. And I've always imagined, I don't know, because we don't have any journalists covering the speech, which is a shame. I've always imagined the audience, by the time they get through that second movement, they're like, "Give me a towel, man, it's pouring here." But then he ends the second movement by doing Jonathan Edwards one better. He says, "There's a horrible reptile coiled up at your nation's heart. Tear it away, tear it away. It's eating out your heart. But you may still have time." And the second movement ends. And he pauses. And maybe that's when the towels are handed out, I don't know. And then the last little movement of the speech is kind of letting the audience back up. He mentions that the Constitution can be read as an anti-slavery constitution.
Can be read.
Can be read.
Yes.
Very controversial, but he lays out his beginnings of his anti-slavery interpretation of the Constitution. And then he ends with verses from "Go Sound the Jubilee." He ends on hope. And he says, your country is young. Mm-hmm. It's still changeable. I think he even uses the word malleable. It's still young enough to be shaped. It's possible. But you better act soon, because that reptile's coiled at your nation's heart. It's a use of language that, speaking of writing for the ages, Douglass wrote that speech for the people way beyond that hall.
Oh, yeah.
And our man was a marketer. He already had to print it up. He took it on the road. And you could buy it for 50 cents a copy, $10 for 100, and he had one of his sons with him selling it to crowds. He knew he'd written something kind of special. He had that baby printed up to take on the road and sell it.
Yeah.
But it's a moment, of course, the theme of it is the hypocrisy of the Declaration of Independence. This is a great nation formed by that document, but look what it's become.
And Lucas, yet just a little bit later, Abraham Lincoln sees it as a way to sort of perch his argument atop of it and move forward on it. He sees it as a foundational document for what he intended and eventually did do.
Yeah, it's remarkable. We've been teaching Lincoln for over 30 years, and I'm still astounded by the fact that, for example, the Fugitive Slave Act, revised notoriously in 1850, that could produce Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Right.
But you don't hear a peep from Lincoln about how bad it is. He thinks it's bad, and we find out about that in the House Divided speech, 58. He even mentions it in the first inaugural address of all places. Not a peep from Lincoln in 50 about that. But it's 54. When Stephen Douglass, chair of the committee, he's the most powerful politician in America between 1850 through 1860, the most powerful politician in America. He gets the Kansas-Nebraska Act passed, which allows local white populations, which is to say local white males, the choice of whether they want to introduce slavery into this territory north of the Mason-Dixon line that since 1820, slavery has been banned from that territory that was part of the Missouri Compromise. Douglass says, hey, maybe I can tamp down the agitation over slavery by saying, let's get it off of the national plate. Get it out of Congress's halls. Let's let the locals decide. Didn't we do that with New Mexico and Utah in 1850, after all? This theory, popular sovereignty, as he calls it. Why don't we just divide Nebraska into two territories? Kansas, let them figure this out. Nebraska, let them figure it out. Let's get on to other business. That's what brings Lincoln out of political retirement, if you will. He had served in Congress from 1847 to 1849 and pretty much just went back to his law career, but still had more than a toehold in politics. But it's that brings Lincoln back and roused him like nothing else ever did, as he put it in a campaign autobiography later. And what was so pernicious about it? Because after all, Douglass emphatically and repeatedly say, I don't care how you vote on it. The important thing is that you vote. That's the American way. That's how freedom spreads. Not because the federal government tells you what to do. Leave it to the locals. Remember, we began as 13 slaveholding colonies turned states. Lo and behold, 6, 7 of those states got rid of it. Not because of constitutional edict, but because the locals decided to get rid of it. Nothing is more American than that. And Lincoln says, oh, I think there's something more American. It's equality. And what's insidious about popular sovereignty for Lincoln, he says, you don't have to have anybody arguing for it to become national. Just you whites become indifferent to what happens to people who don't look like you way out west in the federal territories, Oregon, right? Who knows Oregon, right? Let them figure that. It's no skin off your nose. And Lincoln says, oh, yes, it will be. This is compounded by the Dred Scott opinion, the ruling by Chief Justice Roger Taney in 1857. And Lincoln calls it insidious precisely because it's going to nationalize slavery in America. And by slavery, we mean racial slavery, black people. And Douglass was a categorical white supremacist. Lincoln said, this is becoming a country I do not recognize. Words to that effect, precisely because whites are beginning to be persuaded that they can be indifferent about the protection of rights as long as it doesn't affect them today. And so the great challenge for Lincoln, and he called this, we need to read in 54, his great Peoria address, another speech you need to read, much longer than the second inaugural. We need to re-adopt, he says. We need to re-adopt the Declaration of Independence. Our Republicans robe is soiled, he says, and trailed in the dust. But we need to purify it, if not in the blood, in the spirit of the revolution, what he calls the spirit of 76. And so it's this readoption of the Declaration where your rights are not based on your race, and we would say today, or your sex, or your religion, or your nation of origin, but your rights because you're a human being. He says the more we move away from that, the more we carve out exceptions. Well, this doesn't apply to Catholics. This doesn't apply to black people. This doesn't apply to foreigners. The more we do that, the more we actually lose our understanding, which he believed was the founding understanding of our equal humanity.
And it's always, indeed.
Applaud Lincoln.
Indeed. Indeed. It's fascinating to me to think about the way in which the Declaration of Independence has such resonance from the founding all the way through until now. And so I think about the Civil War period being followed many decades later by the Civil Rights movement, and there Dr. King's speech in 1963 refers to the Declaration of Independence. You know, lots of folks talk about Dr. King's movement being about civil disobedience, which it was, but at the same time, it was hearkening back to the promises of the Constitution and very explicitly in 1963 to the Declaration.
And the dream language doesn't come to the end of the speech, or toward the end. The second paragraph of the I Have a Dream speech is all about he does it in beautiful metaphor, but it's all about the Declaration. He doesn't name the Declaration of Independence, but he doesn't have to. He calls it a promissory note. It came back listed as insufficient funds in the Bank of Justice. That's a metaphor you can take home forever. That's the Declaration he's referring to. And it's one in a line of just hundreds. I'll give you one other use. I mean, black Americans in particular have, but all groups have, labor movement, et cetera, have used the Declaration of Independence when they needed it. It's universal in that sense because of these creeds. You can forget who wrote it. You can forget about the terrible contradiction, the hypocrisy about slavery and the Declaration. There was a black historian named Benjamin Quarles. He taught for his entire life at Morgan State in Baltimore. In an essay he once wrote, I've never forgotten this, he said, "No one ever refused," this is a quote, "to allow America to de-revolutionize its revolution more than black Americans," because of the Declaration. There's one other use, and there's thousands of these. Here's one other use. It comes out of the book I'm writing now. You may or may not have heard of the famous Silent March. This was the march in Manhattan, New York, down Fifth Avenue in July 1917, protesting lynching. It was organized by James Weldon Johnson and the NAACP. It was 10,000 black people, the women all dressed in white, the men all in black suits, children dressed in white, 10,000 people, muffled drums, no sound except the thump of their feet. And they had banner after banner after banner, poster after poster. But out front was a group of, 8 or 10 people carrying a giant banner all the way across Fifth Avenue, one in the course of human events. It's the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Reminding the country of its creed. You will lynch us? Read that. When they got all the way down to Union Square, they broke formations and broke into dance and song. But that's how I began my new biography of James Weldon Johnson, because it was his idea. Churches planned it, but this is all over the place. I mean, the Declaration gets invoked when people need it. I'm part of that too. That's me too. That's us too. Italians have done it. For Columbus Day, we smile about Columbus Day now because they're just Italians. There was a time when Italians had to fight to have Columbus Day. I don't know, the Irish had to fight for St. Patrick's Day. Now everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day. But, you know, it's there when we need it. It's like, it's a scripture. And that's what Pauline Mayer's famous book is entitled, The American Scripture.
So on that note, and before we turn to the audience, because I was supposed to do that 1 minute ago, but I do want to ask this question. In light of what you said about when folks need it, right?
Yeah,
Different
yeah.
groups at different times need it. Thinking about our politics today, which parts of the Declaration of Independence would you say we need most to remember? I'll wait.
We have to decide who goes first on that one?
I'll start with Lucas because you spoke last.
Oh, okay.
Right? Rock, paper, scissors.
You're up, brother.
Well, I mean, I like the way David began this by saying that it gave us our civic, that is to say, in our capacity as citizens, it gave us our civic language. And so I think the good news about this year, America 250, in short, is it's forcing us to reread the thing and reacquaint ourselves with things that have become too familiar: equality, rights, consent, revolution, and getting us to talk about what these things mean today in light of what they may or may not have meant back then. Those discussions, even if we don't agree about it or come to it with agreement, I think we need to come to some consensus about what those things mean. Otherwise, we would be suffering what I would call a political identity crisis. This is what happened, and believe me, I am not one of those who says, "Oh, this is kind of like antebellum America. We're just on the cusp of another civil war." No, we're not. Don't believe that. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. But if there were to come a time where Americans don't agree on what equality means, what rights mean, what government by consent, which means the vote, means, those would be dangerous times. But I have faith that we can look at that document and talk about it in a way where we can shore up, as Lincoln put it, we could readopt what that thing means and must mean for us to have perhaps different ways of getting to the same thing, right? Securing individual rights, pursuing a common good, where we can have the same ends in mind and still have political parties where we're going to disagree about the policies that get us there. But we have to agree on the ends. It's when we disagree about the ends, and I would say in this country, if we disagree about the ends, we are disagreeing about what it means to be American, and therefore what we are owed under our common Constitution.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's sort of like a statement of what our collective heritage is.
Yeah.
Whatever our disagreements are. David, same question to you. Which part could we use most now?
I love the question. A week or so ago, we had a Zoom, Ty and Nina and two of us. Maybe there was someone else.
Professor Smith.
Right. And at some point, somebody said, but what if Lucas and David don't disagree on anything? Maybe here we have a little disagreement. I think we're a little closer to that edge. We're not on the brink of civil war as we think of civil war, certainly not like the real civil war we had in the 19th century. We're not going to have armies in the field. But we have terrible division. And polarization is the nice word now. Did you wake up today polarized? We're supposed to all be polarized. How's your polarization quotient? You know, but you know, I think we need to go back and read. I didn't read all the way through the part. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right. It is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. I don't know where the line is, but where is the line? Where elements of authoritarianism reach a stage, depending on who you are, a federal employee, a member of the military, a teacher, a university professor, a worker somewhere? What if you're a voter and you wake up after the fall elections and you realize my vote didn't get counted? I'm really pissed. What do I do? Who's speaking for me now? This election wasn't fair. What if the week or two after that, people are organizing, they're in the streets. They don't trust the election. They don't want it certified. Then you've got a breakdown of democracy, the republic. We had that breakdown on January 6th, big time. Big time. It got stopped. And 1,500 of them who did it are all out because they're pardoned. I mean, at what point do usurpations, is that word, become such that large collectives of people will not take it? I don't want violence. I don't want civil war. I don't want, but we already have civil conflict, lots of it. And I'm not saying we're on the brink of civil, although I'm going to Berlin in June, and American Academy there asked, I have to give a lecture, some big lecture, and I was going to talk about, I don't know, the Declaration and the meaning of democracy, and they said, no, you got to give us something more explosive or exciting. And I said, all right, quote, is America on the brink of a new civil war? I'm going to argue no. They don't know it yet. I'm going to argue no, but I'm going to use the 1850s.
Bait and switch. Sorry.
No. I'm going to use the 1850s to show, well, we did have this once, and here were the ingredients that led to that. Let's use history for why we should use history. We're not quite there yet. The nation is still malleable, maybe. But is there a reptile coiled at our heart now? About to eat it out? You answer that. I'm not going to answer that.
It becomes the right of the people to answer that. Yes.
Usurpations. What? I don't know how polarized you are, but keep your list of usurpations. That's what you
Well done. Everyone, that concludes this portion of tonight's discussion. Thank you to both of our speakers.
Thank you. Well done.
And so now we're going to take questions from the audience. Someone has a mic, so please raise your hand, and Ari will come around with the mic. There's someone there.
Thank you for speaking today. So my question is...
Is that on?
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't know if they can.
Can you hear in the back? Okay,
All right,
thank
never
you.
mind.
So very similar to how Russia was in the mid-90s with going democratic and then almost having returned back to communism. If the people were to vote in something very, with a majority that goes against the American ideology of equality, should the people in power respect that vote, or should they go against the democratically elected opinion and go for what's right?
Well, it's not only our tradition, I mean, it's our law that we accept the results of legitimate elections. It is the law. And most of us do. Most of us.
Yeah, we're beginning with the easy questions. Okay. This is what I think.
Good one.
What caused secession?
Yeah. It's a good place to start.
Bad losers. Bad losers. Lincoln is, in so many words, argued that a republic, to remain viable, generation after generation, election after election, has to produce two things: good winners and good losers. In 1856, this new thing that Lincoln even didn't call himself a Republican for 2 years. He's like the only Whig in America between 1854 and 1856. Then he campaigns for John C. Fremont.
There aren't any Whigs left. It's just him.
Well, just him. He's like,
Whig
people are
party
calling me an
died.
abolitionist. I'm not an abolitionist. I still think I'm a Whig. Whatever. Letter in 1855. So he becomes a Republican in 56. Their first bite of the apple.
Yeah.
They don't win the presidency. So 2 years later, it's 1858. they do win more seats in Congress. So their second bite of the apple is 1860. The point is, in 1856, this new party, which many are calling a sectional party because nobody dares raise their hand for the Republicans in the South, the Republicans don't preach "not my president" to the dough-face from Pennsylvania, James Buchanan. They don't preach resistance. In America, it's, all right, our opinions did not win this time.
Yeah.
We didn't vote for that guy, but according to the Constitution, he's the president of the United States.
Right.
In other words, we have to obey. We have to be good losers. 58, gained seats. 60, improbable Republican nominee. Lincoln, even more improbable president. 1860, no executive experience. You know the list. And good for them, Northern Democrats said, we don't like this guy. We don't like what they're preaching, their platform. But according to the Constitution, 180 votes was a clear majority. Doesn't mean, there's no requirement in the Constitution that they get electoral votes from Mississippi or Florida or Alabama. He's the president. And to their credit, Northern Democrats didn't preach resistance.
Stephen
They
Douglas
didn't
went
say,
into the South.
Stephen Douglas in October is reading the
Accept the
returns in the
election.
states and says, Lincoln's going to be the next president. I must go south.
Yeah.
He goes to the upper South, and they read him the Riot Act, but he says, look, I would be in the front of the line if this guy does something unconstitutional.
Sure.
But to his credit, he was pro-union, which is to say he was pro-constitution, and Douglas is arguing against secession in the upper South. But the point here is Republican government, small r, has to produce good winners and good losers. We have to figure out how to be good losers while not giving up the fight if your guy didn't win.
Right.
You have every right. So for me, number one, you introduced me as a charter member of the Academic Freedom Alliance. Number one, we have to maintain and bolster our freedom of speech in this country.
Right, I agree.
So in particular for dissenting voices, in particular for the voices that are outnumbered, we have to protect their rights.
Don't you think we're at a stage, though, where we don't have, everyone's not on board on this now. We got a lot of bad losers. And they believe they won once when they didn't. And
Are they keeping their, I don't mean to interrupt you, but are they keeping their hands to themselves? Do we see them like rampant expressions of civil disobedience or
we don't know
subversion?
yet. We'll know in November whether
whether
they can affect the election in ways they're trying to. They may not be able to. I think that's the question. It's a great question. When do we accept? And by the way, that same Republican Party, you're right. Republican Party sucked it up, so to speak, but they built their insurgency based on that Dred Scott case. I mean, the whole latter half of Lincoln's House Divided speech is resistance to the Dred Scott decision.
Well, obeying the
Political
decision, but political resistance.
Yeah.
In other words, we're not
Yeah.
going to accept this as a precedent. And in
No.
fact, when they get, it's in their
We're gonna
platform.
denounce it.
The secessionists are like, look, how can we stick around if you have a president and a party that says they're
Yeah.
not going to enforce the Dred Scott opinion? That is good law. And
Well, they're
it's
gonna
bad
try to
law, but
repeal it.
And they do.
Yeah,
In
well,
April
they
and
do.
June of 1862,
Yeah.
even though Taney's still on the court, even though Dred Scott
Yeah.
is still good law,
Yeah.
they're like, we don't care. That's not our understanding of what Congress's authority is, and we're going to pass a law, one line, bans slavery from all the federal territories,
Right.
even though a 7-2 decision said Congress doesn't have that authority.
Easy to do when you got 11 states out of the Union.
True-
there's
true
Civil
that,
War
true
going
that.
on, but that's another matter. But great question, because we're on the cusp of something. We don't know what it is yet. There are other questions.
There's
here, though.
another
We're
mic in the back.
We're talking too long.
I saw another hand here
The
also.
woman in the red
Yes.
suit, I think, had a question.
Yeah.
And so did you, right here in the second row.
Yes.
Yes.
And then in the back.
And there's one in the back.
Regarding the Declaration of Independence itself, the document, how much of it was plagiarized?
I
I know
would,
Richard Henry Lee brought up the resolution from Virginia, and I think a lot of it came from there, but where did it come from before Virginia?
I guess you'd have to, I hate this, it sounds, How would you define plagiarism? Because, for example, John Locke, a long train of abuses and usurpations, Jefferson wishes he came up with that. That's Locke. Second Treatise of Civil Government, that's just lifted word for word. He's like, he couldn't even, paraphrasing would butcher it. So, are you talking that, or are you talking Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights? Are you talking about Jefferson's own in 1775, right? The Summary View of the Rights of British America, where the one major complaint about the king there is he didn't allow the colonies to ban the importation of slaves. He exercised his veto, what he calls in the Declaration draft. He prostituted his negative. Jefferson he had said it in the Summary View of the Rights of British America. He brought it back, and that was that long paragraph that they took out, where he refers to the rights of Africans who are being brought over in Middle Passage as sacred rights of life and liberty. Verbatim, that's what he said. The people that are brought over on those ships against their will, according to Thomas Jefferson, who owned hundreds of slaves, they possessed the sacred rights of life and liberty. He goes on to explain why they pulled that out. It's like, it wasn't true that all the colonies wanted to stop the importation. Georgia and South Carolina said, no way, we need that labor force. And then he says, hey, it's not just Southerners. Guess where they're making those ships?
Well,
They're making those ships up north. And so it isn't a Southern thing, according to Jefferson. But because it wasn't true of all the colonies, and there's other reasons, but because it wasn't true of all the colonies, they pulled that paragraph out. So plagiarizing, Jefferson plagiarized himself. Summary View of Rights of British America, the George Mason, the Virginia Declaration of Rights, Cato's letters, this anonymously produced series of pamphlets.
he drew a phrase from the English Declaration of Rights in 1689 that said, that used the phrase detestable and insupportable tyranny. That's a damn good phrase. I'd use it too. I don't think plagiarism is the right word here. Borrowing for sure, drawing upon for sure. I mean, they could have produced a little bibliography with it maybe, and that one might have covered their behinds a little bit. But, if you were writing a mission statement for a university or a college, a mission statement for whatever, I bet you're borrowing the language from 300 other mission statements, probably. I mean, because it's a hard thing to do in an original way. A lot of it is from John Locke, and it's just rephrased.
Laws of nature, nature's God, that's Locke.
That's Locke, yeah. And Jefferson gladly admitted that. I mean,
Locke, Sidney.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll go here,
Here, and then go back.
and then we'll go back. Yes, we're coming to the back.
Thank you both for coming. It's been very interesting to hear you guys talk about the Declaration of Independence. One particular thing that was interesting to me was how you mentioned that Washington had his army first introduced to the Declaration, having it read to them. And I'm curious if the two of you think that we have lost something, considering the fact that the primary way that most people read or interact with the Declaration for the first time is by reading it instead of hearing it aloud. I'm just curious to hear your guys' perspective.
What do you mean lost something?
Yeah.
What lost something in that we don't do this public reading of it anymore, like maybe General Washington did?
I'm curious to ask your opinion as to whether we've lost the communal aspect of this reading to an assembly, and whether, because it has become more fragmented, because it's become less personal, if it's perhaps also become more distant.
A very good point, frankly. Go ahead.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is, it would seem, I think, in communities, some communities still do this, have public readings. Some families read it to their children on July 4th, so it's still happening in pockets, as it were.
NPR reads it.
Well, there you go.
Staff of reporters, the whole thing.
The first thing that comes to my mind is, I think it would, in areas where it hadn't been done, and so the tradition would be new, it would, I think, come across as quaint and not in a good way. In other words, not, by the way, I would love to see this happen. But I think initially it would come across as quaint because what we have been habituated to learn about our past is our faults, not our virtues. Mm-hmm. And that the sophisticated approach to the past is, well, come on, they didn't believe all that stuff because, right? And so to read it as if people don't know Jefferson was a slaveholder, never tried to get out of the debt that required having that population in its various plantations. Simply to read it would come off, in my opinion, as nostalgia in the worst way. So I think as a response, we ought not to do that without teaching it. Oh, yeah. And that means not just having your kids memorize it for that test to pass your standards of learning, SOL, whatever, right? But to actually examine the thing and to talk about, well, how do we make sense that a slaveholder decided to argue for a new foundation for liberty as a part of the separation? We're not just creating a different or a new country. The claim was it was a novus ordo seclorum, a new age, a new order of the age. And what was new about it was something they thought was better than the ancient regime, better than the old way of doing things. And so getting people to really take serious the argument of the Declaration on its own terms, and then ask the question, so how do we square this with not fringe elements of the founders, but the big ones, Madison, Washington, Jefferson, slaveholders, all, right? How can we square that? I think those should be done in tandem. Otherwise, it's just going to be a ritual.
There is a quaintness to this. In fact, Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech is getting used the same way. It's the alternative now to the Declaration. Huh. It shows all our flaws. It shows the hypocrisy, and I hate that aspect of it. But we're college professors and teachers and, historians and at least part-time intellectuals, I don't know about you. And we want people to sit down and closely read it. We want them to take it seriously. We want whole communities to do close readings, and we know that's not quite going to happen. But I'd be all for, I don't know, if it has to be declared by Congress, it probably won't happen, but communities actually challenging each other, paragraph by paragraph, to research what it means. There's a book that I was weaned on in graduate school by Pohl. I had him for my first seminar and PhD program. He taught intellectual history. He wrote a book called Self-Evident Truths. And the book is an intellectual historian's careful, thorough explanation of what he always called the deepest meanings. And Paul had been here tonight, he'd still be talking. But the deepest meanings of the 4 first principles. It's a brilliant book. I mean, you get insights. Well, this came from Algernon Sidney, and here's what Sidney meant, and here's what so-and-so meant. But we need some popular lame person's variation on that may not be possible. I don't know. But I love your idea that something's lost and that it possibly is only you find it on restaurant placemats. Anything on a restaurant placemat is in trouble of being completely forgotten. I saw part of Douglass's 4th of July speech on a placemat once.
No way.
I think it was in Rochester.
Oh, well, that makes
so they
sense.
can be forgiven. That's his home. But once something reaches the placemats in a restaurant, it's over. There's no meaning
under the
anymore.
food.
But why not public rituals? So it's not done by AI. It's human beings using the words. I don't know. I'm all for. I like ritual.
Okay, in the back, you've been waiting a while.
All the way in the back.
Thank you. I was just wondering, with all the talk about the Declaration of Independence, if it were to be written in modern America, do you think there would be any additional natural rights, or do you think there would be any excluded? I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
That's a great
Wow.
question.
Good one.
Anything added or taken out?
Whoa.
Wow. David gets to go first.
There'd be added. Think of the word equality. Equality's undergone stages of meaning. In this version, it's equality before nature or God, just as Jefferson says. It's natural rights. But by the time you get to the 14th Amendment, it's equality before law, explicitly in that language. Now, that's been evolving, but that's a very different thing. You and I are equal before the law now, not just before God and nature. But then you get into the 20th century, into our lifetimes, and we started talking about equality of opportunity. And of course, that has many different meanings. Equal starting points, equal access. That came out of the Civil Rights Revolution. Equality of opportunity. Wonderful idea. A fantastic idea. Very hard to always agree upon. And then that even had a fourth stage. Equality of economic opportunity. A guaranteed wage, some people say, is a natural right. Health insurance. Would health insurance, as a natural right, appear in a Declaration of Independence today? A lot of people would say, you bet it should. And would that we had a country that declared it that way. You know, so a 21st century Declaration of Independence, of course it depends on who we're declaring independence against, I guess, but I can think of all kinds of things that have, through modern times, have become a part of that idea of equality. And maybe even a couple of the liberty today, ooh, liberty's taken on all kinds of meanings. So, yeah, I hope we don't have to do it, because that'd be almost as hard as it would be to rewrite the Constitution.
We have time just for a couple more questions. Okay. Ari, if you could grab this nice man here. Yes, here to my left. Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about the signers? Were they
The what?
states of the? Could you speak a little bit about the signers?
The signers.
Were the states of the signers, were they enthusiastic or a little bit hesitant?
What I know about just what the Second Continental Congress was doing in '76, I believe it's in April, when they send what they referred to at the time was a circular, which is just a fancy word for a letter, to all the colonies, basically anticipating. I mean, remember, we're already at war. I think any discussion of the Declaration should talk about the fact that we're doing this peaceful, civil, political thing by arguing about the rationale for this July 2nd resolution that tells us we're going to break from Great Britain, we need to find allies, and we've got to form more or less a federal union. It has three parts, the Lee's resolution. We have to remind ourselves that we've been at war for over a year when this is happening. So in April, I think it's April of '76, the Second Continental Congress, anticipating what's coming. Not everybody's on board yet, even in the Second Continental Congress, but anticipating that independence is coming. They say to the colonies, eventually become states, hey, you better work on constitutions because the king has already declared us out of his protection. We are really going to be on our own. And if we're going to live up to this freedom that we claim nobody should protect but ourselves, right? A free people don't need a tyrant. We need constitutions, so you got to start working on those. Massachusetts comes up with one in 1780. Again, we're still at war. And the Bill of Rights that prefaces their constitution has language that's very close to the Declaration of Independence language about, instead of created, I think it says born, free, and equal, or something to that effect. So it's definitely in the air, this revolutionary spirit and these principles. So in terms of where the states are, I've already mentioned earlier that New York couldn't sign it on July 4th. In fact, they spent the rest of the summer, that document that's got everybody's signatures didn't happen in a day. It happened over weeks and a few months. New York, their delegation didn't have permission. They were not, and the word used is, they were not instructed to approve of a formal break of independence. They had to go back and say, hey, do you want to be left out here? Everybody else is, we need to get on board here, and they do on July 9th. So I couldn't get you to each state what they did, but the fact of the matter was, at that time, they were all told, you better work on this, because it's coming.
5 or 6 of the states had only one signer, the small states. Massachusetts, Virginia, Pennsylvania had 3 each, I think. So it's not a very large group. There probably was, I'm not an expert on this, there probably was more unanimity here than there certainly was with the Constitution. Oh,
Yeah.
Lord, there was division over the Constitution. But here it was, you either kind of had to sign on here, or what if the other, 11 or 12 go to war and you're in New York and you're not part of the war? I mean, it's going to be pretty rough.
It's happening
But
there
it's a
with
small
like-
group of men, actually. Only one from many of these states.
Okay, I see more hands up, but we actually are out of time. And I apologize for that. Should we go ahead and end? Because we are. Okay, so I apologize that I'm not able to get to all of the questions, but it has been a fascinating.
David's going to stick around at the end, answer all the questions.
So just come to the front. David will be here. But I'd like to give each of our speakers
Don't know anything
an
about Delaware's
opportunity-
delegation.
Okay, well then, there'll be other questions though. But I want to give both of you an opportunity to just offer some final remarks that strike you as especially compelling that we've not already covered.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, I will say this. Let's end with Frederick Douglass. I'll do that. This July 4th speech, which is delivered actually the day after, July 5th. In that speech, as David mentioned earlier, he talked about and praised the fact that the United States was a young republic. In other words, it was still kind of filling out its shoes, still getting its sea legs as a truly self-governing nation. And of course, the thing he studiously avoids talking about in the first part, slavery, he saves that for the middle. He's all praise for the founders, and he's all praise for the kind of country they set into motion. And his claim is, and this is to this question about how would we say it today, if not a Declaration of Independence, a declaration that kind of our affirmations of blink this, that, or the other. Would we add stuff or get rid of stuff? I think Frederick Douglass would say, we pretty much got it right. We just got to live up to it. In other words, he called them saving principles. He called them eternal principles. When you have saving principles, if they really are saving, and when you have eternal principles, in other words, principles that have been around forever and will be around forever, there isn't, according to Frederick Douglass, there isn't really going to be something new for you to be free. We've got the principles. We just have to create structures that secure those principles in action and operation. Of course, consent is the great challenge because the consenters aren't always entirely informed. They're shaped by their environment, and then prejudices are part of that. It's freedom for me, but not for thee. So consent will always prove that to be a challenge for every generation. But I think I'm with Douglass. I'm with Lincoln here. We don't revere the founders because they were first. We revere them in the best sense because we think they were right. And I don't think where they were right, they can be improved on.
I'll offer a little different take for what it's worth. I think the Declaration and the beginning of the Revolution, the birth of the United States, and because we have these creeds, these principles, it will always be contested. Any country that announces itself as based on creeds, which have a certain religious quality, civil religious quality to it, is going to get contested. What does it mean? What does equality mean? What does liberty mean? What is forever contested? It's perhaps why it's still there. We've been terribly contested many times in our history. We had a civil war. We had civil conflict in the Great Depression. We had civil conflict in the
World War I.
1960s. We've had some very rough times with this. You've studied some history and know that, but this will always be contested. It's what's both fascinating about it and difficult. We're not always going to agree. And then came the Constitution, of course, to give us ways to disagree. That's what constitutions do. That's what democracy is. Democracy is a constant process of maybe getting part of what you want, but you aren't going to get the other part. So I like that quality to it, but we're in a dangerous time of that contestation. Because some people don't play by those rules of losers and winners. They just don't. And I guess I'll leave it there.
Okay. Everybody, David Blight, Lucas Morel. Thank you.
Well done. Well
Thank
done.
you. This was enjoyable. Thank you all for coming. Have a great evening.